Hey guys, what's up? Yes, I know this is another recording. Camera's acting glitchy, and I don't feel like trying to fight with it, especially since in a couple of hours I have to rush off to my part-time job. So, yeah, let me just get on with this. With this whole, race intelligence debate thing that's been raging over YouTube now, though I think it's kind of subsiding a little bit. I don't know. With all this crap that's been going on with that, there's been something that I've been mulling over. Something about the thought processes that I'm seeing that I wanted to kind of touch on. I just hadn't figured out exactly how I was going to explain my viewpoints on it. But then after the blog TV that I did this past Tuesday, later that night, I was talking with my friend KBiomech, and as I was talking to him, the subject again came up, and he and I both agreed the stupidity of the whole, racist ideology of hierarchies, and you can lump up different races scientifically, and that there's a hierarchy according to intelligence, which is bullshit. I'm sorry, the science doesn't support it, but I don't need to go into that again. Other people have done a better job than me. But as we were talking about it, I started going into what I've been mulling over, and I was finally able to fully explain it to him, and he agreed. So I think I'm gonna share it with you guys. And I'm going to warn you, this is going to go on a bit long. I'm going to try to keep it under 15 minutes, but there's no guarantees. What I wanted to get into is what I'm seeing as dogmatic thinking and how it's pretty tenacious. You don't have to be religiously minded, or you don't have to be in a religion or worshiping a religion in order to succumb to dogmatic thinking. See, I'm bringing this up because, as I had pointed out, a lot of the people who call themselves race realists, and I'm focusing on that right now because this is going to be a very good example of what I'm trying to explain. A lot of the people who ascribe to this idea are atheists, or those who consider themselves free thinkers, or the people who they claim that they're all about logic and reason, and coming up with their conclusions and supporting their views. Not all of them, mind you, which I'm going to get into later, but a lot of the ones that we've seen on YouTube are. But it's one thing to claim that you're about a certain viewpoint, and it's another thing to actually have the thought processes that support that viewpoint. In other words, it's one thing to claim a particular title on yourself, but it's another thing to actually change your thought processes. If you're not changing your thought processes, then you haven't really changed. I bring this up because a lot of people who are atheists now are converts. What I mean is they originally were religiously minded. They were brought up in a religious household. They were brought up in a particular religious point of view, whether it's Islam or Christianity, whatever. And something happened which made them change their minds. And then they converted over to, they say, oh, I'm an atheist now. I don't believe in God. I don't believe in any of this religious stuff. And they may be, truthful in that they really think that they've rejected it. They have rejected it. But what they haven't done is change the way they think about the world. They haven't changed their thought processes. They haven't changed their paradigm or their perspective. And that's the harder thing to do. I know it's hard for converts to switch over from one particular ideology to another, especially if that ideology is something that's been ingrained in them for a long period of time and was the cornerstone of their lives for many years. But that fight is nothing compared to the fight of actually changing the way you look at the world, actually changing your thought processes. That's even harder, and a lot of people can't do that. And I think this is one of the reasons why we're now seeing what we're seeing now, where people are adopting certain archaic, or should I say dogmatic ideas, even though they're not religious, or even though they consider themselves to be, the users of logic and reason. Like, oh yeah, this is rational and logical what I'm thinking or what I'm believing, even though there really is no fact to support their views. But they think it is. And the reason why they think they do is the exact same reason why a religious person thinks that their particular belief is right and exact. It's because it makes them feel good. It's a comfort blanket, and it also gives them a view of the world that puts everything in order. One thing I've noticed about dogmatic thinking is that according to dogmatic thinking, no matter what type of dogmatic thinking it is, and I'm going beyond religion here. Religion has a lot of examples we can use, but you can also see this with political viewpoints. You can see this with pseudoscience viewpoints. You can see this in a lot of philosophies and ideologies. One thing these dogmatic things have in common is that there is a certain correct order of the world. There's a certain set of rules that need to be followed. There's a certain structure to the way the world has been designed. And also, even if they will admit that the word design may not necessarily be true, they will still use that because it goes along with that belief system. There's a certain way the world was designed or structured or set up that cannot be broken. And once you understand this order, you understand all there is to know. And even the things you can't answer don't matter because you're following along that particular order. The answers will come in time by a greater mind than yours, usually like, an outside authority or a mighty leader of some sort, or, or invisible deity. There is this kind of structure which gets them to say things like you're going against nature whenever you happen to disagree with their viewpoints. You will hear this a lot, which is very ironic when you consider that they don't actually observe the natural laws as what, as has been discovered by scientific experimentation and study. But they use that term, you're going against nature, a lot whenever you go against a belief system of theirs, as if that actually means something. Now, I'm pretty sure some of you guys are beginning to get the wheels turning. You're beginning to see what I'm talking about when I'm saying this type of dogmatic thinking, because we hear this a lot. And the sad thing is, this order that they set up for themselves, that they base their entire lives on, is make-believe. It has little, if any, basis with reality. It's simply a structure that they set up in order to be able to, make some sense of the world around them and to, get up in the morning, tie their shoes, go to work. It's the thing that keeps them going. You take that order and that structure away from them, they fall apart. They need it in order to survive. Because that's what gets them going. That's what gives them their self-worth, that sense of structure. If you're dealing with a religious person, the sense of structure that they have is that there was a God that created everything, and that everything has meaning, and there are a certain special select group of people who receive their deity's blessing, and then there's everyone else, the infidels, the heretics, the heathens, the ones who you either have to subjugate or try to get on your side, convert them, or, we have to teach them better because they don't know any better. They're not as good as us, so we have to treat them like children and guide them along. That sort of condescending point of view, if they're not just outright violent against you. Which leads me to another thing that I happen to notice about dogmatic thinking, this idea of a chosen group of people. Again, this is easy to see with religion, but you can also see this with all this other shit that's being debated. And again, the race realist argument, I use the term, very loosely, that race realist term, you can definitely see it there. This idea that there's a group of people who are more fit or more deserving to enjoy the full benefits of living on this planet than others. Either you're more superior through just by being who you are instead of what you've actually accomplished. And that other people out there somehow are just undeserving, either because they don't believe in the same invisible deity, or they don't hold to the same worldview or ideology, or just simply by matter of their genetics, or what they look like, or what their lifestyle is. There's something that sets them apart and makes them less worthy than thou. And this is definitely an archaic type of thinking. It's been used as an excuse for certain nations to go around the world and, F around with other groups of people, steal their resources, take over their lands, and force unfair rules upon them and put them into, caste systems and, the lower levels of their society. And they do it with the reasoning of, we're just better than they are, or they just won't know any better, or, well, we're the righteous ones of God and God would have wanted us to do such a thing. And you even hear this type of stuff today. Like these days, I have to admit, it does get me to start grinding my teeth when you hear somebody going around saying, I'm blessed, as if somebody else isn't. This is that type of dogmatic thinking of, I'm one of the elite. I'm special somehow. I've been chosen. Yeah, you might have been chosen for the butcher's block, but you haven't really been chosen for anything extra special. Now, with another thing that you happen to notice with dogmatic thinking, and this is something that tons of people have paid attention to, is this rejection of fact if it goes against their viewpoints or their belief structure. If they happen to come across any real evidence that suggests that their worldview is wrong, what they will do is they'll go and hunt for anything that supports their viewpoint, whether it's factual or not, to throw back at you. And if you disprove that point that they came up with, it has no basis in fact. If it's a claiming scientific merit, there actually is no scientific merit. It hasn't been peer reviewed. Whatever political process they're trying to say is true for you turns out to be nothing more than propaganda or skewed polling. Whenever you happen to present this back to them, then they'll accuse you of trying to suppress the truth, or that there's a political agenda behind what you're saying, even though all you're trying to do is educate them on something that they sorely are ignorant in. And this is a kind of mental shielding that they're doing when they do that. It's protecting them from having the cornerstones of their lives ripped out. Remember, those who succumb to dogmatic thinking need that dogmatic worldview in order to function. They need that structure. They don't, despite the fact that they claim that they're all about logic and reason, the fact is, if you're going to be going around the world and just simply examining things in front of you rather than automatically just categorizing them, it's a scarier way to live. Basically, when you succumb to dogmatic thinking, it feels a hell of a lot safer, and you're not putting yourself in the scarier position of not knowing what's going on around you, of having to change your mind every now and then. It's kind of hard to build a safe, self-sustaining structure that way. It can be done, but it's more of an adventurous one. A truth seeker is never comfortable. Dogmatic thinkers are. The last thing I wanted to bring up, as far as a point in dogmatic thinking, is this idea that things must remain pure, quote unquote. That there's this certain pristine state of the world, or pristine state of living or ideology, or even in humanity, that must never be tainted. Nothing can mix. Now, this I happen to think is one of the most interesting of the viewpoints, because not only does this go contrary to the way the natural world actually works, but it also happens to show a rather hypocritical side to those who hold to dogmatic thinking. When you see them complain about things like multiculturalism, where they come up with the term cultural Marxist, and they have no idea what that term actually really means. They're complaining about other unclean cultures coming in and effing over their own, like they had this perfect culture or this perfect nation or this perfect religion, and something comes along to completely fuck with it, and they look at these infidels coming in to f up our pristine order of things. That we have to reject them. We have to keep everything homogenous. We have to keep everything pure. We have to keep the religion pure, or we have to keep the race pure, or we have to keep the nation pure. You get this sort of thinking. But what's funny is when it's the other way around, they don't care. In fact, they prefer it. They have no problem mixing their cultures with other people's if they're the ones who are instituting the mixing. You can take Americans, for example. You take your average spoiled American and you put them in a European town, or Chinese town, or some place that's not American, and you put them in the middle of the area where they don't have anything American there, no one's speaking the language or going with the usual American colloquialisms. You don't see a McDonald's or a Starbucks or anything like that around. Many of them will complain. It's too different for them. They feel uncomfortable there. It's not right. But if they happen to go to the usual tourist spots, there's a McDonald's, there's a Starbucks or something, and they're like, oh wow, this is the greatest vacation I ever had, even though you never actually saw what the other culture was like. And we have no problem imposing our American values on everyone else, even to the point of pointing a gun at them. We're going to introduce democracy to these people. We got no problem forcing our values on others. But if some other culture happens to come in and has a different viewpoint, then we scream about, multiculturalism and having to keep things pure. Which once again goes with that kind of superior mode of thinking that goes into, that dogmatic way of thinking, that somehow the person holding that dogmatic viewpoint is more superior than others. There's no problem forcing that superior view on others. And since everyone else is inferior, if they happen to bring their stuff to you, then you have to reject it, which is very hypocritical. I was saying that that was the last thing, but I just realized I'd forgotten, and I went past the 15 minutes. I'm sorry. I wanted to go a little bit back to also this whole thing about, a superior group of people, that this notion that there's some people more fit than others. That also shows a rather parasitic point of view to a dogmatic thinker, which again I find that rather ironic, because many times when you bump into a dogmatic thinker, particularly when it comes to race and nationality, they point to others as parasites. Yet, it's usually the dogmatic thinker who has no problem latching themselves onto merits that they themselves did not achieve. If somebody in the group that they're saying that they belong to happens to achieve something significant, they will latch onto that achievement, basically stating that, oh yeah, since I'm part of that group, I'm capable of doing the same thing. This is just simply a result of who we are as, whether it's their religion or their race or, their nationality or whatever. Our people achieved this. And by proxy, they also mean that I have achieved this. You didn't achieve shit. The individual achieved that accomplishment. It's like me saying, okay, like, if Michael, like with certain black athletes, like Michael Jordan, for instance, he can dunk a basketball really well, or Mike Tyson back when he was in his prime was knocking motherfuckers out. It's like me as a black guy then going, see, that's what we black people can accomplish because we're black, which I've heard people say, and it's fucking stupid. No, the reason why they were able to accomplish what they accomplished is because that's the path they put themselves on, and they were damn good at it. They did it. I cannot dunk a basketball like Michael Jordan. I'm okay at basketball, but dunking, sorry, no. And yeah, I consider myself an okay martial artist, but being able to fight like Mike Tyson, sorry, not gonna fucking happen. To claim those sorts of things is parasitic. You're trying to latch on the merits that you didn't achieve, which is pretty much what a lot of dogmatic thinkers tend to do. Now, I want to call attention to this because it's, again, very easy to fall prey to this type of thinking if you have not changed your thought processes. If you're still thinking dogmatically, then it doesn't matter that you switched over, you claim that I no longer believe in a God, or I use logic and reason now, or I'm a free thinker. Not if you haven't changed the way you look at the world and the way you view things. In fact, I'm going to suggest that a lot of these people who fall prey to this type of thinking after they've claimed that they've switched over to something like atheism is probably because the reason why they switched over in the first place wasn't necessarily because they suddenly were accepting evidence that went contrary to what they believed, but rather that the old things they believed disappointed them in some way. They got heartbroken, like their faith was shattered. Their crisis of faith wasn't because of reading something or suddenly understanding that their beliefs were bullshit. It's more that they were disappointed by it. Their prayers weren't answered. A family member died, and their belief structure wasn't able to comfort their anger over the fact that that person died. The group that they were a part of rejected them because of who they are. Maybe it rejected them because they were gay, or maybe it rejected them because they had a different political viewpoint. And they're like, "Fuck you! You're not part of our group anymore." And then that made you angry enough to say, "Well, fuck your God." But now, instead of going around looking for logic and reason, these people are just simply trying to find another belief structure to make them feel as good as the last one did. And when they bump into another dogmatic type of ideology that makes them feel as good, they instantly latch to that without accepting the evidence, despite the fact that they claim that they've now put themselves on a path where they look for evidence to accept something. Now, they're doing something that makes them feel more comfortable inside, whether they realize it or not. And that's why it's so easy to fall into it. People have to understand, if you're going to be changing a life viewpoint, you have to also change the way you think about life. And that's the harder thing to do, I will admit. But it is incredibly necessary. If you don't do that, you're going to end up believing bullshit again. Very easily. And we're seeing this right now on YouTube. Anyway, that's it. I've yapped on this way too long. Catch you guys later.